I'm going to cross it, Maxine, if I can. Please forgive me. But I want to welcome. I want to bring in Apostle Scatterbury on this because one of the areas that he wanted to address tonight had to do with the matter of things like birth, tourism, and Barbadian citizenship. And since we are, this is why I've often said, there's a lot of different topics that we deal with here on the show that tie into one another. It's almost impossible to deal with them in isolation, or in a vacuum. Let me put it that way. So if I can just take a moment to welcome you, Apostle, to the show again tonight. A real joy to have you joining myself and Maxine.
Good evening, sir.
Good night. It's good to be here with both of you. Good to see you guys again. And
yes, good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. Rev.
We're the only two thorns. Dear me. According to my screen, I'm seeing the rose between two thorns. So
that was a thorn between two roses. It's all right.
Well, let it be according to script, sir. Let it be according to script. Yes, sir. It's good to see you guys tonight, man. It's really good to be here. I was listening intently there about this situation that we have. That I think it's unfortunate that Barbados in 2026 has become, such a place with so many disturbing things that are happening, that are being levied on our people by this administration, who apparently doesn't seem to care anything about our people. I was just before I say anything more, we have to prove, and I was talking to a gentleman here in St. Peter. We just had a road that was done from the junction there at Trademark, mile and a quarter, and through Breveter, and that road finished outside of E.M.M.A, which is the residence on top of Mount Breveter, for returning nationals, so that their vehicles, they have smooth road to right now. If you follow the rest of that road into French Village, you pretty much have to put your vehicle in the center of the road and let it decide which hole it's going to go into.
You could probably use the Pearly app.
Yeah. So I said I hope you guys are realizing that these roads were not constructed for you. You only get to benefit from them, but they were designed for the people who are bringing the money into Barbados. This is where I want to take off and add to what Madam McLean was saying.
Let me, if I can, before you take off, if I can give you the landing directions on the runway. I listened to a debate. I don't know if you heard it. I listened to a brief debate in I believe it would be a committee in Senate to do with this matter, what you were talking about as well, Maxine, and citizenship and so on. And I couldn't help but think that the government just doesn't get it.
Right.
They seem to think that what we're discussing is the rights of birth of a woman or a child, to give birth to a child in a country, which of course automatically means that child is a citizen of the country in which they're born.
Right.
But what I don't think they seem to get is the cheapening of our citizenship.
Right.
In terms of what we are observing being promoted, as you mentioned, Maxine, there are, and it's glaringly obvious. I mean, it's not even done with some degree of what's the word I'm looking for? Concealing. It's blatant, out in your face.
Right.
Where there are advertising obtaining a Barbados passport.
Correct.
Specifically as
Correct.
a result of traveling to the country pregnant and giving birth to your child here.
Right.
And I don't think the government gets it. I don't think they understand how they have cheapened the whole aspect of the citizenship of our country. Please go ahead, Apostle, and we'll bring Maxine back in.
Yes. The reality is, again, the government has breached, in my mind, the sovereignty of Barbados and Barbadians. Again, the government must understand that they are the servants, they're the employees. They were voted in by the people. So the behavior that we're seeing from this administration is, okay, now that we have back the government, let's continue to create a Barbados that works well for the masses that we associate with. And if you notice that this is more of an African, the opening of our doors and the whole work, we just had that major situation there with the earpiece where we have a lady that came in and she was on social media, no food, no money, no anything. I thought that that would have been investigated by the Minister of Labor, but no such activity. To see that Barbados is being promoted as a free-for-all. And the reality is that we've come to a point where in Barbados right now, the two major things that I want to look at while I'm speaking, this administration has shifted working to benefit Barbadians to becoming a government that is more about turning Barbados into a place for wealthy individuals to come. And let me say this, that, and here Madame Maxine talked about the issue of affordable housing in Barbados. Let's look at the reality that there is a shift to wealthy housing in Barbados. And there's a shift in many times what banks are going to do now, because a bank is not going to want to set up at a government housing project anymore when there's, let's say, for instance, Corverley, there where their houses at 500,000 and 600,000, when there are properties in Barbados that are at millions of dollars in US value. You're looking at an area where that is the kind of resources, the kind of money that they want flowing in Barbados. So if you notice now that the major government housing projects are on the back burner. So it's like, you know, this is what we really care about, because this is what sustains, you know, our economy right now. Building houses at 240, 250, 300,000, 275,000. That's not where the real money is coming from. So you can see that there is a shift away from providing wholesome housing for our people and a shift towards the high-end market. Now, the other aspect of this is the area of how the cost of living is being shifted, because we're realizing that now in supermarkets, what we would call the average supermarket that caters to the low-end customers, they cannot do the work of stocking their shelves with the high-end products like probably Massey can do. They understand that if I want to stay in business, I got to maintain a certain level of products on my shelf that allows the average Barbadian to come and shop. So you can see, Rev, that there is a shift, the way how this government is shifting Barbados away from its people. It's becoming too expensive for their own people to come here, to achieve here, to live here, to work here, and the country is being open for the more wealthy. Because if you really don't understand, wealth right now is on every level. You know, there are very young people who are already millionaires and already multi-millionaires. So we're not limited to any one group. Then you have those wealthy individuals that may want to send their children to Barbados. You know, they're looking for areas in Barbados where they can be, and they're people. The money is no issue. The $1.5 million is not an issue. There are people that can do that cash. Okay, so what we have to look at, we have to ask ourselves, why has the government of Barbados allowed such a dimension of high-end activity to take place, where their own ministry and what they have in their manifesto towards the people of Barbados is not manifesting. So this is where our people have to begin to understand that there is a system now in Barbados where our government does not seem to care about what's going on with the average Barbadian. And this is where we have to point the finger at the failure of the government where housing is concerned, because the elements in Barbados that are working with the high-end aspect of our nation, they have all the resources, they have all the land, they have all of the leverage given to them by the government to continue to build and to continue to expand and continue to make sure that Barbados has those type of properties and those type of amenities for the people who are going to come to Barbados. So one of the things that you must know is that the average female who's pregnant is not going to come to Barbados. Okay, so they know exactly what they're looking to do. So you're not just going to get any and every female coming to Barbados out of these countries. This is going to be an investment for high-end families in Africa and possibly around the world, because they know that the passport in Barbados, you have probably 120 countries that Barbadians can freely fly to without having to get a visa. They understand the power of our passport. Okay, but this administration has not given Barbadians the opportunity to live well or to do well in their own country. I just came out of the supermarket this evening, and I was amazed to see the number of Hispanics, the number of Jamaicans, the number of Chinese people. I was just simply amazed to see the amount of persons who are in the local supermarkets here in Barbados. So this tells us that there is a shift, first of all, and that there's a carefully devised system by this administration to move Barbados towards an open door, an open gate for other persons to come in here and benefit from what we have. The other element that I want to close on is, if your healthcare system is not working well for your people, how are you influencing individuals? How is our healthcare system being advertised to the world? Because if it's not working for Barbadians, what levels of advertisement are you using out there to let people know or to make them believe that our healthcare system is world class? Because honestly, it really isn't. So there's something that the people of Barbados must get up, and they must begin to speak openly about this activity, because it does not spell good for Barbados in the long run.
Well, I'm glad you touched on the matter of health, and we'll come back to that in just a moment, because we received some very disturbing information which we want to share with you tonight. But there's a question, Maxine, on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. The question is for you.
Diplomat?
Yeah, if diplomats give birth in Barbados, do their children get citizenship?
I don't think so. I think that they will. Well, I would have to check individual countries, but to my knowledge, they will be citizens of their countries. I would have to go and see what agreements are in place. Because some people may figure it's beneficial for them to be citizens of their own countries. But I suppose a child born in Barbados any child in Barbados can be registered as a thing, but as a citizen of Barbados. But I would have to research that. I don't like to rely on my memory when it comes to these things.
Well, but, I think. No, go ahead, please finish.
No, I was saying, but I, that is something we have to research. But you were saying something disturbing.
No, I was just thinking, if it's a diplomat, it means there's an embassy, and generally embassies are representative of, their space is their country, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's why.
And that may be maybe a little different where the diplomat is concerned, because in a sense they're not really in your country, they're still in their country, which is in your country. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
I understand. Your embassy space is your
country,
territory, so to speak. Right?
Yeah. I mean, our police and even our criminal investigation department or anybody just can't walk into an embassy. You get people who can claim diplomatic immunity for doing certain things and breaking the law and so on. So maybe, I don't know, but if you could research it, Maxine, maybe, and get back to us on it in one of the upcoming programs. Yeah, that would be good. Another one that comes up here, I'm just looking at it very quickly, Apostle. They're saying here that I figure that the African connection is going to bring in financial opportunities and growth for Barbadians and break away from the total dependency on large European strongholds, not put us out. Your comment there, either one of you or both of you.
Okay, I will comment. You see, as somebody who worked on trying to get direct connection to Africa. In fact, I recently was communicating with a Nigerian friend of mine who lived in Barbados, and I remember the person expressing regret when we had the situation of a charter flight back in 2008, creating problems. Now, the movement of Africans, whether they're coming directly from the continent or being facilitated to move to the continent from North America and so on, is something that's desired. What we are seeing as a consequence of that flight is that we're hearing of persons who are turning up in Barbados, either having been promised jobs and finding themselves disappointed, and persons who are using, and let me say that in the latter case of pregnant women, this didn't start with the recent arrival of earpiece. I can tell you that in the last 5 years or so, I have heard of this. I have had conversations with a couple taxi drivers who said that they would have transported persons to discover that, they were here, and they were being accommodated to have babies. And it wasn't it was very much part of a network that was set up to do this. So I but say that what we're seeing is both positive and negative consequences of direct travel, because as I say to people, young people who might risk their lives getting on a crossing the Sahara or crossing into Egypt and wherever else to get to the Mediterranean and all of these things, may find it easier to get on a flight that takes 8 hours. Unfortunately, they don't do it by themselves. And the question is that we have to, for our purposes, who or what is happening, who is facilitating this on the ground in Barbados? What networks do we have? What domestic networks do we have? Or what regional networks do we have that are saying to people, yes, you can come here? I mean, we've seen on the screen right now is the lady who talked about passports. We've seen videos of people saying that they can get you a one-way ticket. Now, I think that there are a lot of questions to be answered, but I would pause there because I think Apostle may want to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I really agree with what you were saying there. The question that I want to put forward is when, and I'm looking at this from the area of the lady who was on social media, having no money, having no resources, came into Barbados on that earpiece flight, promised work, and came here and found nothing. what are the parameters now of our immigration authorities? Because I know persons from in the Caribbean that came here to Barbados from other neighboring territories, had the means to take care of themselves, and they were not allowed entry into Barbados. How does a woman who has no resources comes to Barbados on the whim of, finding greener pastures, and is allowed into the country without any type of financial support to take care of herself? Now, I've been, in the early years of traveling, going into the United States of America, and, at one point being questioned about whether or not, I had enough, financial resources to take care of myself while I was in the U.S. But I'm asking, how do people who have no resources, no backing, how do they get through our immigration and customs without anyone asking the question and calling a minister or calling a senior person and saying, okay, listen, this person came in on this flight, they have no money, they have no real address, there's no, who's taking care of these individuals? How does a female get to a residence in Barbados and is staying at a place in Barbados that has no money, has no resources, came here on a flight that is probably what, $4,000-$5,000, and gets to Barbados, has no contact, has no support, has nothing, and yet gets through our immigration here in Barbados? How does that happen? So are we going to? Yes, sir.
No, I was about to say, well, I watched a short clip of that committee meeting this evening, and I was amazed with the Honorable Marsha Cattle. I think she's minister in the Prime Minister's office to do with economic affairs and planning. I think she must have been chairing the committee, and I couldn't. People need to take responsibility for things. Because what she was technically saying is that while the government can pass legislation which would outline certain things as it relates to what we're discussing, it still falls within the parameters of the immigration department, the immigration office at the airport, to permit the person into the country.
Correct.
Or prohibit the person from coming into the country. But if the policy of the government is such that the immigration officer feels a sense of obligation to be accountable to the policy that the government has established, how does he go about prohibiting that person from coming in? Because she did cite a couple of things like what you're citing, they will cite whether you have enough money, how long you staying, if you know people in the country, that kind of thing, as we're going into places like the United States and so on. But it seemed as though she was trying to pass the buck over to now the immigration department or the immigration officer, rather than the government taking responsibility for establishing the policy in the first place.
Right. Well, I watched that video.
You saw it as well?
Yeah, and I realized that from listening that they're not willing to take responsibility for the actions that they're inflicting on the country. I've noticed that with this administration, if it's an opportunity for them to look good, it's all over the media. If something is happening that makes them look bad, it's either not brought in the news, it's not in the paper. And this is a problem that we're having, because you can't try to cover up all of these cracks that we're seeing over and over again. I'm saying that either our immigration policy, if you're going to be doing this, you have to upgrade your immigration policy. Okay, there's no way that other countries are going to allow you to come to their nation 8 months pregnant, okay, knowing that you are coming to Barbados to have you're purposefully coming to Barbados. It's not that you were here and, you know, you went into labor. You're purposefully leaving your country, has a government that should be putting things in place for you to live well in your own country. And Barbados, our government is saying, if you're not living well in your country, if your government isn't, you really look at it, Barbados, our administration is telling the governments around the world and telling people, if your government isn't doing a good enough job, then come to Barbados. We're going to help you. If you want to have your child here, come to Barbados, have your child here, and then, you know, the process of time, you can apply for a passport for that child. So we have to watch the message that we're not only sending out to the world, we have to watch the message that we're sending to other governments around the world as well, because, you know, surreptitiously, you're telling the people of other countries, your government is not doing a good enough job in making things right for you. So if that's not the case, then get on a flight and come to Barbados. So right now, what are the parameters that are given to our immigration officers? When you meet someone coming in from, you know, an African country or any country for that reason, do you just tell them, welcome to Barbados, stamp the passport? You know, there were no questions, you know, before. I've been to the airport when I've had, you know, ministerial friends coming in from Guyana, because they wanted to make sure that they were coming to the person that they had on their ED card. So a person comes in here on earpiece, you don't ask them any questions. Okay, where are you staying? How long are you going to be in Barbados? Obviously, that lady didn't come here for 2 weeks, or didn't come here on vacation, didn't come here for a month. She came here to work. Somebody lied to her. Somebody took her money from her, scammed her, and sent her to Barbados. So is this what we're going to have to end up dealing with? Because as Madam McLean said earlier, 2008, when they had to create a situation to get a chartered flight to get people out of Barbados, this is the same thing that's happening again. So what is happening on the level of the immigration authority? What's the legislation? What are the new parameters? What are the rules that they're going to be working under? Can they deny a female that is 8 months pregnant entry into Barbados, or do they have to allow it?
Well, here's the question on the screen for you, Apostle, and it says here that the person is saying you are not allowed to ask a woman if she's pregnant. I think this is one of the things that Marsha Cattle was pointing to in the same said video, while ignoring when they were asked or whatever. You get the thing, or I think they were referring there to the treatment for the pandemic. But you know, when I'm going into the United States, and you all can both either correct me or guide me. When you're going into the United States, one of the first questions they ask you, if they don't see it, is, do you have a return ticket? That's one. The next question they ask you is, what is the intended purpose of your visit?
Correct.
I think that's one of the first questions they ask you. What is the purpose of your visit? They will sometimes ask you, based maybe on when they go through your passport, because you take my passport, for example, has the United States stamp in it so many times, I guess they don't ask me anymore. But they will ask you concerning your capability to sustain yourself while you're in the country for the prescribed time you've indicated. You know, so I'm just wondering. I don't know if Maxine, you might be able to answer the question in terms of what questions are permitted, and I just wanted to keep this other question in the back of your head. That is, should Barbados review its citizenship laws? But what kind of questions are permitted, Maxine, for a woman?
No, to me, an 8-month pregnant woman, that's visible.
Oh yes.
You know, so I don't know that you I was actually just typing a question. I will go back to it after I've commented. But if I have no difficulty with an immigration, if I turned up at an airport anywhere in the world and I was heavily pregnant, one of the things you may not, I think the initial question would be outside. Well, because I saw it with persons in the region now, and excuse me, and this is where there might be a difference between, because in recent times, CARICOM citizens are entitled to automatic 6 months stay. Now, the challenge would come if you had a heavily pregnant woman and she's coming into Barbados from any member state within CARICOM that are party to the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and free movement and so on. I think you'll be challenged to ask that person, because they say they're given an automatic stay. Now, my question would be, and this is a question I pose to the officials: how do you deal with a situation where somebody is saying that they are visiting for 6 months and they are visibly pregnant and not? In other words, put it this way, for a CARICOM citizen, and I'll come to non-CARICOM people in a second. A woman, if you are having a 6 month stay, for you to not be visibly pregnant, and have a baby in Barbados, you would have to at least about 3 months pregnant, 3 and 6 months.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah, about 3 months.
Anybody over that would clearly, if you're over
4 or 5 months.
3 months, yeah. But if you're over 3 months, it means you're gonna have a baby in Barbados.
Yes.
Right now, the question is that I suppose you're saying if you're entitled to automatic 6 months stay, then you have a baby in Barbados, and it means that the child becomes a Barbadian. Now, if you are visibly pregnant and you come from Russia or Nigeria or Mali, come from Timbuktu in Mali or wherever, and you are visibly pregnant and you're asked the question, which we are asked going to other places, what's the purpose of your visit? And the person says you're on holiday. I don't think, and this is where I asked the question of our immigration officials and the Minister of Home Affairs, would it be proper for the immigration officer to say, well, ma'am, I know that you are pregnant, or you look pregnant, I suppose, because you can tell if a woman is pregnant at that advanced stages, and you saying that you're here on holiday. What are you proposing to do? Because then you ask, because to me there must be some follow-up if that person clearly looks like and I must say he or she, that she is about to deliver, and is saying that she's coming here on holiday. Right. You understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, certainly.
Yes,
I think that it is all fair, because I remember seeing documentaries of a situation, I think it was in the state of Florida, where Russian women were doing this consistently, and there were actions taken to address it. Now, I think that this throws up for me a number of questions, because, and if you would indulge me a bit, we saw the video of that young lady. We heard of women supposedly visibly pregnant. We also were told that earpiece was coming twice a month. It is, so there'll be two, like, let's say your person essentially will be staying here for a month or whatever. We have had a return flight of earpiece. My question would be, how many people arrived? How many people came intending to return on after that first flight? So in essence, can the Minister of Home Affairs or the Chief Immigration Officer say to Barbadians with a high degree of accuracy, and I'll use earpiece first and then I'll broaden the question, how many people did they have return tickets? And were there return tickets for that second flight, or were they staying for extended periods? How long, etc.? Because I believe that we should know who is in our country at any given point in time. And I would move away from focusing on airpiece passengers to ask the same chief immigration officer or the minister of home affairs whether they can tell us with a high degree of accuracy where people on the island are from, because statistics used to be kept. What statistics are they keeping? Can they tell me for the month of May how many people, because we used to keep tourism statistics, so we should be able, and we used to be able to tell how many Canadians were here, how many Americans came, how many people came from Britain. So can we say with a high degree of accuracy how many people arrived and how many departed from various countries? Because that helps us to understand how many people from any particular or of any particular nationality are on Barbados. And then you start to look at different kinds of work permits. That's information that should be shared. Similarly, I would say, and I will pause when I finish. I remember when we make efforts, because especially when we talk about crises like the one in Venezuela, countries have recently been saying, look, we need also not only to know who is in our country, but we need to know where our citizens are. And so, but I think that we are getting very lax in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's going to create a lot of problems for us if we don't.
Well, we have a question there on the screen again. Should Barbados then, in light of all that we are discussing, and I want to take a few minutes as we come toward the end of the program to look at a matter that public health, which is very concerning. Because I think both of you alluded to the matter of health being one of the criteria, one of the aspects of quality of life, immigration, people coming into the country, the burden on the health system, these kind of things. But should we then, in terms of our laws, should Barbados begin to take a serious look at reviewing its citizenship laws, where you begin place, because you have places like, for example, the United States that is quite seriously looking at the matter now because of how aspects of home security, I think you call it, home security, in terms of terrorist activity within the context of the country, within the confines of the country. They're now looking quite seriously at people who are obtaining passports in other jurisdictions where they would then be able to gain access to the United States a lot easier without being identified as a risk because they're carrying a particular passport. Is this something that we too here in Barbados should be looking at? Not because of terrorist activity, but because, of course, it puts additional burdens on the entire infrastructure and operation of an economy of the country. So is that something that we should be giving very serious consideration to?
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Apostle.
Rev, I'll tell you right now, it's one of those things that we should have in place before we do anything like what we're doing right now. Just as quick as this government was ready to put the cybercrime bill in place, you cannot continue to step out on these little limbs and not expect them to break at some point in time. This administration has a habit of rushing into things without stopping and building the necessary framework. Matter of fact, laying the right foundation first and then erecting the proper framework to make sure that these things work. And I want to quickly go back to, a person is coming to Barbados to work. What about the work permits? Okay. I know for sure before persons coming into Barbados to work had to make sure all of their documentation was in place in terms of the work. How does a person come to Barbados to work on earpiece with no work permit? Okay. How how is our national security being breached openly? And it's being laughed at by this administration as though it's not an issue. And I think the time has come for, you know, some level here in Barbados that can speak directly to this current administration, let them know these things that you guys are bringing to Barbados. And like I said, stupidity seems to have become the new intelligence. But I'm seeing the cracks. I'm seeing these things happening over and over, and there's no proper legislation. There's no proper feasibility studies or anything being done. It's just like, okay, we're the ones in power. We have 30 seats. Nobody can tell us what to do. So let's go ahead and do it anyway. 2 weeks, you know, Barbadians will talk a lot on brass tacks for 2 weeks, and then it will just fade off. All we have to do is make sure it stays out of the media so that there's not wide publicity on it. And it seems to be their modus operandi. They get into parliament, they get in the lower house, they get in the upper house, and they act like these things, Bajans should accept these things without any kind of, you know, recourse. I think that right now, we as Barbadians, we have to take stock on what we are allowing this administration to do and how we are allowing them to do what they're doing. That's another issue. But I think right now it is critical for us to determine, in terms of our citizenship and our laws, who gets to come to Barbados, what happens in Barbados, what are the procedures that allows a person to go ahead and become a citizen of Barbados. So all of these are things that are necessary right now because this spells trouble for us in the long run. And I think as you know, here on the Morrison Week Show, I think sensitizing Barbadians to not just the pros, but the ills that can, you know, befall our country with this consistent allowing the gates and doors of our nation to be exploited by persons who have not done anything to build Barbados or help us to become the nation that we are today.
Well, you know, it would be interesting, another question up there on the screen, it would be interesting, I think, to have a discussion with other countries to see how they address the issue, how they handle it, what do they do, what do they implement, what do they have in place, you know, to see if it's something that can be, you know, for the lack of a better word, copied within the context of our own country. But I want to quickly, in the last few minutes that we have of the show, to move to a matter that came to our attention, I believe, just this afternoon. And I'm going to read it as I have it here, and then leave it for you all, you know, in terms of discussion aspects. What are the allegations? If they're true, what are the potential public health implications and so on? But we had a situation come this evening where it had to do with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital food safety allegations, where patients are being put at risk. And we are looking at the allegations made public by an employee who identifies himself as Chemo Sergeant, who says he works in the kitchen of the QEH, prepares meals for patients. The employee has alleged on social media that the hospital kitchen has a rodent problem, including the presence of rat droppings and rat urine in food preparation areas. He claims he continues to prepare meals that are served to patients on the wards. These are allegations made publicly by the employee. They have not been independently verified by this show, by this program, by our show. And we welcome any responses from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the Ministry of Health, or any other relevant authorities. We have seen what the allegations are. If they are true, what are the potential public health implications? That's one question. And then the next question we want to ask has to do with the matter of whistleblowers. What should happen when an employee raises sanitation concerns? Are they adequately protected? Because you could consider them whistleblowers. So if you could take a look at those two questions in terms of what I've just shared with you.
I think clearly that is a problem. We have had, from all the issues we've seen in our school system, our primary schools, and so on, recent as last month, I believe, where there were issues of rodents. rodent problems continue, I would say, to escalate in Barbados. And therefore, if our systems of maintaining hygiene standards and so on are falling, it can get itself, because if you're talking food and food preparation, food disposal, because clearly I don't know how food remnants and so on are dealt with. So I would not eliminate the possibility of a rodent problem. And clearly that is unacceptable. That should be a no, there should be no toleration of that in a health institution.
Zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance was the word I was trying to find. No, that should not happen, because I mean, you go to accident emergency, and I've been there multiple occasions. And I remember on occasion killing a mosquito and so on, you know, you have open doors and whatever else. But my first thought, I didn't come in here to get you know, dengue fever, whatever. So think about a rodent. Now you're talking about, you know, that's serious. So that is something. And if an employee is moved to go on social media, then that individual, I don't think would have to be, something would have to be seriously around that individual to fabricate. You know.
Mm-hmm. I will say that we were unable to hear the video because it did contain some language which we would prefer not to have made public. But in the context of what you're saying, Maxine, don't they do inspections of these facilities? And if so, how regularly are those inspections done?
What I would say to you is I have seen a number of things fall by the wayside between 2018 and now when it comes to the QEH. And I say that because I know, I remember that I knew some people on the board of the hospital when we were in office, and the kind of systems and required reporting and certain things have fallen by the wayside. In fact, I remember there was a point when there was no official board, how should I put it, a board of the hospital in place. In other words, the appointment of the board had lapsed, and it was and it had not been, and you know, new instruments of appointment were not given and so on. I can tell you that I don't know what's happening in recent times. I know recently somebody that I know became chair, and in fact, I will send a note to that person to say this is an accusation. What is the situation? You know, right. But that is an alarming situation.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm going to say this, if I may.
Sure. Please go ahead.
This is a situation that was brought to me personally by a member of staff at the QEH. Okay, so I'm not surprised that there is someone that's actually speaking up, because I heard about this situation probably about 4 months ago, speaking to an individual there. Okay, not just in the what I was told, not just in the kitchen area, but also in the laundry. Okay, there are elements of that situation going on at the QEH, and as Madam McLean said, this is alarming. This should not be happening at what should be our premier healthcare facility. Now, I was in the United States earlier this year, and I had the opportunity to speak with, you know, top surgeons because of the situation I was there to be a part of, and I saw the different levels of health care, and I've seen that over the years the QEH has maintained a certain kind of operation that, in my perspective, is way below the standard international procedure. Okay, and I'm not saying this to discount what's happening there. I know that there are individuals there who are doing their absolute best on a daily basis, and I want to applaud them. But for those individuals who are skilled and trained to come into an environment that is pretty much below what is required, for Barbadians and the government to be talking about, this whole birth for passport system, these people have no idea what they're coming to, and unfortunately, it could spell disaster for Barbados going forward. But I just want to make it abundantly clear that this is not the first time that I am hearing of this matter, and from what I was told, the key individuals within the government who actually were there and experienced what this individual is saying, they witnessed it for themselves. So the mere fact that it is becoming more and more dangerous and nothing really has been done to rectify that situation says a whole lot for our healthcare system in Barbados.
I was just checking. There is legislation in Barbados on whistleblower. There's the Whistleblower Protection Act. I'm here looking at it now. It was
yes.
It was notice was given on the 15th of December 2021. The first reading took place on the 20th. The second reading on the 20th of December the same year. It went through. So in other words, it was passed it was in the House. Sorry, I was looking at the Senate. It went to the House in November. The second reading, which meant the debating of it, took place on the 14th of December, and then it went to the Senate and was passed on the 20th of December 2021. So theoretically, we have that. The Whistleblower Protection Act 2021.
If you look in the private chat, in our private chat, Apostle, you'll see the link there.
Okay.
And you can copy that link. You can copy the link from there, and it will open up for you. Because go ahead, Maxine, please.
I was just saying it just to read quickly, and then the objects and reasons. The bill would deter, it says, and combat corruption and other improper conduct by encouraging and facilitating disclosures of such conduct, protecting the persons who made such disclosures, and regulating the receipt, investigation, and other treatment of such disclosures. So in other words, if the person who has alleged that this is happening at the hospital, he or she should be protected under this legislation. But I know there was, but I would have to go through it. But you notice it was done, and so the legislation talks about receiving, inquiring into, and otherwise dealing with disclosures, protection of whistleblowers, miscellaneous offenses and whatever. So there is legislation, whether or not it is enforced.
It's enforced and actually works.
Right.
Yeah, is the question.
Because that's what it comes down to. And one of the things that I observed, one of the attorneys in the discussion to do with the criminal justice bill, that bill to do with gangs, anti-gang legislation and gun courts, I saw one of her comments relating to the matter of enforcement. And it would appear to me, when I look at some of the things that are happening just simply on the public highway, you got minibuses that are not supposed to be playing loud music. They're not supposed to have amplified systems in their buses. But they pass you all day, every day, amplification systems blasting music as loud as ever, past police vehicles, and nothing is done. So I think at the end of the day, the other question that's there on the screen, I think becomes now a very pertinent one, and that is what steps should be taken to reassure patients and their families. Because I Googled it while I was listening to you, Maxine, because roaches are also carriers of leptospirosis. because of their activity. You know, they're crawling along the ground where the rats would urinate and feces of the rats would be, and so on, and they pick up the virus. So they're carriers of it as well. And I think it is concerning when you are in a hospital and you're being provided with meals. The question then treats to the dishes, the spoons, the cups, all of these things, even when they're sterilized, where they're stored, how are they kept? All of these now are concerns that would concern both patients and the families. Either one of you.
Well, Rev, I have to say this, that again, if we are thinking about Barbados being, and we're advertising Barbados as a premier international destination, then all of the amenities that makes Barbados an international preferred destination should be there. And I go back to the story that I heard that eventually created the Sandy Crest facility. The fact that if there was a facility that was close enough, a life could have been saved. And then we're looking at the type of systems, the type of instruments and equipment that we have there that actually makes this hospital what it is supposed to be. So if we have that right now, we're saying if this is being exposed, it means every one of those patients right now who are receiving food on a daily basis from that kitchen, they're under threat. And
sorry, go ahead.
This is something that has to be rectified. This is not something that we can play with, because if we have to do it with the schools, we most certainly have to do it with the hospital. So this is a matter for concern, and serious concern.
Yeah. Yes, Maxine, you were.
I was saying that this allegation is really symptomatic of a fall off in standards in several ways, and in systematic and consistent maintenance and attention to the day-to-day issues that will impact on proper operations. We've had so many schools, and in some instances, a single school having over and over to be closed for rodent infestation and so on. I drive around more so than walk around parts of Barbados, and I ask myself what is happening. We are into hurricane season now, and I use this as a slightly different situation. But I grew up from childhood seeing on an annual basis the trimming of trees and so on that encroach on the highways and the streets and utility poles and these things in preparation for hurricane season, right? You drive around and the place seems in a lot of instances to be suffering from neglect. I remember being part of an exercise which ended up as part of a campaign in 2008, and later on the contents of the work done. There was a group of us sat down and we talked about rescue the QEH, because at the time and this started around the time when I used to be a moderator on Brass Tacks, and before that, Tell It Like It Is. And I used to keep notes, and it was clear that almost at some point in time, you just kept getting calls about the hospital. And a group of us sat down, we used to line together, as Bajans would say, and then we decided, you know what? This is something that we should wrap our minds, and we did it. We had focus groups, we had medical practitioners, patients, people, citizens, and so on. And we looked at the hospital and we prepared a document which ended up in the hands of then leader of the opposition, later on Prime Minister David Thompson. Because for some of us, and I unfortunately in that period, between 2000 and 2007, I lost quite a few relatives. If I go back to 97, it would have been my mother, my brothers, my father, etc., several people. So I had reason to be at the hospital. And so it was from personal experience that we had conversations and people calling that calling program, and I was a host, about the problems at the hospital. And I can say to you that we are seeing a lot of things were addressed. And you go back now and you see a lot of things have fallen into disrepair again. And I asked the question, why in a situation where we have levies and all kind of things, money's collected for these, for these purposes, etc. And so the question really and truly is, what is happening at the level of management and the operations of these institutions, the hospital being one of them?
Well, I just wrote down something here. And Apostle, it might sound strange to you to hear me say what I'm about to say. But one of the contributing factors has to come down to the people who are supposed to do the work. Now, I understand government's responsibility in terms of policy and legislation and all these different kinds of things. And we can rightfully be critical of them, without question. But having done what you are supposed to do as a government, and I'm not making excuses for them or anything of the sort, but it would appear to me that the QEH has been a problem through successive administrations. I'm almost tempted to say, but I would be too young from its inception, but I would be too young to know that, But clearly, it has been a problematic area. And I believe that to a large degree, the politicizing of it has contributed to its demise and its decline in professionalism and in the quality of service that is provided. Where you have people who are from different parties who, if the party don't win, they're going in with an attitude and all this, and that is just one aspect I'm thinking of. But I'll give you an example as to why I'm putting this across to you. They paved a piece of the highway between the Top Rock Highway and the the Top Rock roundabout and the Sagicor roundabout. And it took them weeks to mark it. They did a portion of the road out there by the Pine Agricultural, where the St. Carolyn's Business College, Maxine, you would remember, St. Carolyn's Business College was across the road. Then you have the road that takes you to the government facilities. The Pine one takes you back to People's Cathedral. The one that comes across from the telephone company. And that sat there for weeks without being marked. And I'm asking the question, what do these people do when they go to work on a daily basis? Who is responsible for deploying them? Who's responsible for setting up a strategy or plan of how they operate and how they do what they're supposed to do? Because if the QEH is supposed to be, and I don't know, if the QEH, being our premier medical facility, is supposed to be examined, because Maxine, that if you or I were to get a medical certificate, a health certificate to do food, they come through and check us, I don't know how many times a year.
Yep.
You know that. They come through maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times. You're lucky if they even give you a breath. but this is our premier medical facility. So what about the people who are supposed to actually do the work and who are supposed to actually carry out the inspections and ensure that
You're
the
correct.
facility is in a condition that is healthy to provide the services that it's supposed to provide?
Good question, Rev.
I'm not making excuses for the government. I am not.
No, you're correct. You're
I am not.
correct.
You can't.
But at the end of the day, regardless of what government is in office, regardless of what legislation is passed, regardless of what policies are implemented, it's the people in the public service, if I have the reference correctly, who
Right.
are supposed to be doing the work.
No, you are absolutely correct.
Yes, sir.
If you go, I've been to a crop over event at Kensington and other events where food is being served. And you will see the health inspectors, whatever their titles are, with their thermometers, and they will go, and if that food is supposed to be kept hot, they will test it. And if the temperature is not right, they will say, get it out of here. I remember there was an event on campus. The students have Island Week. And I remember one group, a couple of years ago, a group of students, unfortunately, they didn't know the rules. And when the health inspectors checked, the food was not at the requisite temperature. And they were told, sorry, you cannot serve this to your schoolmates because we have standards and you are not going to food poison anybody.
Right.
And as somebody who was food poisoned, not in Barbados, on two occasions, I was in Middle East. I was going to call the names of the country. One was a country in Africa, and I had just gone from a country in one of the Arab states, and it was a massive. In both cases, there were massive conferences, and I ended up with, I got food poisoning. And then when I reflected, I said, but in Barbados, these meals, these are supposed to be hot, and they have the equipment and so on. So if you are required to do that in public spaces, think of the hospital. But as you correctly said, but at the same time, unfortunately, the buck will stop with the minister or the CEO or the hospital, etc.
But absolutely,
you are correct.
Of course.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, even Maxine, you do. I think you do lectures in business and these kind of things, or you did. I don't know if you're still doing it. At the end of the day, if a company does not function the way it's supposed to, the buck stops at the general manager or the CEO. It doesn't go down to what we would term the grease monkey. It doesn't mean the grease monkey is excused from doing his job.
He or she has to do the job. That's correct.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the general manager or the CEO or whatever terminology you care to give the individual to ensure that the job they're supposed to do is done.
Exactly.
And whether you delegate it to persons in your admin, I mean, Apostle, in terms of church administration, you as a pastor or apostle or leader of the church, you can't do everything. You delegate responsibility to staff members or board members or persons within the context of your church or your ministry, whatever it is you're doing, to ensure that the policies that you have established, the legislation, or whatever you care to call it, the bylaws or the constitution or whatever, that is followed. Because at the end of the day, everybody is going to suffer if it's not.
Yeah. Well, Rev,
but at the end of the day, it all rolls back on you to ensure that the people are carrying out what you have asked them to do.
Yeah, well, listen, Rev, I'll tell you why this spells badly for the QEH and its administration. I have a friend of mine that sells juices and coconut water, and just the other day I was passing by him, and he leaned over to me, leaned into the vehicle. He said, that's the ministry. They came to check to see that. He said they came to check to see if I got everything covered and to make arrangements to come to the house to make sure that everything is sanitary while I'm preparing the juices. So if they are doing that on the level of a person who is making juices and selling them coconut water. If they're willing to do that with that individual, why are they not making sure that the standards at the QEH are held to the highest possible levels? Why are they not there doing that? How can rodents be in the kitchen and in the laundry room of the QEH? Those same bed linens that will end up on beds in the QEH. Why are they not doing what's necessary to make sure that our people, patients at the QEH, are being treated at the highest level of respect and dignity when it comes to their performance? Something is wrong here, Rev.
Something is wrong.
It must be rectified.
I think you all would recall the Prime Minister doing a tour of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital not long ago.
Yes.
Not long ago. I did not see the entourage, but I was disappointed that the Minister of Health was not doing the tour. Because what it would appear to be is that unless the Prime Minister is a hands-on person, in other words, what's the point of having a minister? If you have to be the person that goes through the QEH in an attempt to use a photo op or whatever you care to call it, a publicity stunt, to show people your care or your concern, what is the point of having your Minister of Health? Because you appoint people into the position of ministers to carry out responsibilities, and they should delegate those responsibilities. And if there's a failure in their area, then the buck comes back to them. And as the Prime Minister, you should be raking them over the coals, not for embarrassing your government, but for not providing the services for the people who employ you to do the job.
Correct. I agree with you, Rev.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
Look, folk, I wish we had more time, but 10 o'clock is gone. And I want to try to honor as best as I can Marcia's request for me to try to keep as tight to 10 as possible. But there's just so much, sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't. No, don't let me go there. Don't let me go there. Maybe, sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't just deal with one subject for the whole show. But there's just so much happening that it's almost impossible to do that, because in any singular week, there is no shortage of problematic matters occurring or things that would cause questions within any singular week. And it's very difficult then, to be able to deal with all of these. I mean, look at how many things we've dealt with tonight, Maxine.
Yes.
From the beginning.
So even if we start to talk about one topic,
it flows into the next.
A number of issues, which, we talk about the problem at the hospital, and then you look and see what are the implications for other kinds of things and so on.
Yeah, but you look at data centers which are now dealing with health as well, because a lot of people overseas are pushing back at it because of the health issues relating to the proximity of data centers to their communities, which is a health issue. And that health issue becomes a problem when it becomes an immigration matter with people coming in from the country to put a birth. There's just no way of dealing with any singular subject at the exclusion of all the others. There's all an interrelation, interconnection, and networking almost, if you want to call it that, of all of these things. And so it becomes very difficult to isolate any one and just deal with that at the exclusion of the others. All I can say is that you all have again done a marvelous job. Apostle, I'm just so sorry you joined us so late, but I do know why, and I appreciate you being able to come on Friday nights. That I really have to commend you for that, because I do know you have a service before, I believe, and you come out of that to us, and it speaks to the care and concern that you both have for the people of our country. And as you all know, I begin my Friday nights every Friday, not every Friday night, every time I host the show, I start with my national pledge. And I don't do that out of formality or tradition. I do it because I am trying to get into the heads not of the people, you know. I'm trying to get into the heads of the politicians who I know they're lackeys or they themselves are watching this show. The responsibility that you have as a person in government. It has nothing
Yes.
to do with the BLP. I
That's
said,
it.
once the elections is over, that is no longer a party matter. It now becomes a national matter. It now becomes the well-being of the people of the country itself, and what is to the benefit of the people. And that's why every time I host, without exception, I read that national pledge in the hope that it will get through somebody's thick skull, that you do not pledge to a political party, you do not pledge to a prime minister, you do not pledge even to parliament.
Right.
You pledge allegiance to your country and to your flag.
Yes.
So I want to thank you both, because I see an action of pledge in both of you and in Carolyn and in all the contributors to the Marcy Week show. I see an aspect of a pledge to your country. And I want to thank you all for committing yourselves to that freely, with no obligation. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. You do so out of the love of your country and the love of the people of your country. And I want to commend you both and thank you so very much for sharing in
You're
the show
welcome.
tonight.
Thank you. Thank you as well, Rev.
I wish you both a good evening and a wonderful evening. And please go to church on Sunday.